Hi, I'm Paul and thanks for watching another of my videos. In this session what we're going to do is we're going to have a little look at using Microsoft Access to make modifications in SharePoint lists. Because often if you've got a lot of changes to make, or you've got a very long list and you can make changes based on rules, then this is going to be a much more efficient way than trying to make your changes through the SharePoint interface. So I've got a small list here which I'm going to use as a demonstration, but you could imagine that this could be thousands of rows. It doesn't matter. Now obviously we can make changes directly in SharePoint, and SharePoint has come a long way in terms of making that a less painful experience, but it could be less painful still, let's be honest. And like I say, if you could update things based on rules rather than having to go in and manually making changes yourself, then that could save you an awful lot of time, as I say, particularly if the list is long. So if I'm making changes in here myself, as you may know, I've got to select a row, I've got to choose to edit that row, I'm waiting for the thing to refresh. I can modify a few of my details in here and save, and then wait a moment and then I can move on to the next one. We've also got the facility to do quick edit, so you have to make sure nothing is selected and then you can go into quick edit, and that's a little bit quicker if you've got a whole bunch to do once we actually get into the quick edit screen. So come on, here we go. Yeah, so this will save us a little bit of time. I'll set myself back to the details that I had before. There we are. So that can save us a little bit of time. The other thing that we can do, of course, in the quick edit is we have at least got the ability to do this sort of autofill idea, very similar to Excel. But of course you're limited to about 100 items in a list. I think the limit is 100 before you can't make changes anymore. So if you've got a list which is if you've got a view which shows more than 100 items at a time, then the quick edit won't work. So that could be painful. So even if you could say, oh right, I'm going to do a little filter on here. So let's say, for example, we want everyone who is full-time to get a bonus. So we could filter by full-time, and then we could drag this down for all the people who are full-time, and that's fine if the list is not that long. But if it's a very long list and you can only see portions of it of a maximum 100 records at a time, then you've got to do that on the first page of 100 and then move to the next one and do it on the next page and do it on the next page and do it on the next page. And if you've got several thousand, that's going to take you a long time and a lot of messing around. So the better way is to connect to Access. So let's show you how we can do that. So I'm just putting these details back to how they were to begin with. There we go. And now what I'm going to do, let's hit the done on there. I'm going to go into Access, and I've just got an empty Access database. So I've just created a normal Access database, nothing special, just empty. And I'm going to go to External Data, New Data Source, from Online Services, SharePoint List. Okay. If this were the first time I was doing this, I would have to type in or copy and paste in my site URL. So that's not the URL all the way down to the list, that's the site URL, the site that contains the list. And then I've got to choose whether I want to import the data or link the data. So if I want to be writing changes back to SharePoint, then I want to make sure I link to the data. If I import, I'm just taking a copy of the data as it is at that moment, and then the data is completely disconnected from SharePoint. So we want to do a link. And now on the next screen you can see why we only need to put in the URL for the site, because once you've put the URL in for the site, it will then show you all of the lists and libraries, so we can work with libraries as well, that are on that site. So we can just tick the ones that we want to work with. So I'm going to bring in these three for my demonstration purposes. So we click the link box. Very nicely it tells us the last time that particular list or library was updated, and we hit the OK button. And we wait for just a moment while these linkages get set up. There we go. So they've appeared here now on the left-hand side in this navigator window. And I can go into any of these just by double-clicking on them. So these are linked tables, and it will display me the data. Display the data to me in a datasheet view by default. We can start creating forms based on these things. We'll do that in a second. But you know, we haven't done anything other than link them at the moment, and now we can click and go in and see what's going on. This will show us everything which is in the list. Okay, so if we've got 10,000 items in the list, this will be 10,000 items long. You can see them all at the same time, and you can scroll through them, and you can do the same sort of filtering options that we were just having a look at in SharePoint, but you know, typically they work a bit quicker in Access. So there we are. So without doing any more, that is immediately visible that is a bit quicker to work with than working in SharePoint directly. And lots of things are supported. So this was a yes/no field in SharePoint, so it's become a checkbox. This is a list field. So this is the one where in the settings for the field in SharePoint, you say, okay, it's a static list that I want to choose from. And this one is an example of a list, of a drop-down which is based on another list. So this is based on this department list, which I brought in as well. One neat thing on here is if it is one of these lists that is a static set of options, then you get a little button on here that lets you edit these list items. So I might want to remove the intern and volunteer. I might want to put something else in here. So just trying to think what other sort of jobs we've got. I'll tell you what, we'll put this in and then we'll put intern back just to demonstrate that it's working. So now I've just got those items, and if I come back in here, let's put intern back in again. Okay. It'll take it a second or two to update, but there we are. So now we've got that back again. So that's really quick and simple. They've improved the experience of changing those in SharePoint, but I think it's still not as straightforward as the Access way. So here, if we wanted to add and remove things, we've got to go into column settings and then edit the column settings, and then we can come in here and start making changes. So a huge improvement over how it used to be in SharePoint, but Access still has the edge if you've got a lot of these things to do. So back into Access then. So let's have a look at some other cool things that we can do. Access will also support doing things like find and replace. So that's one way that we could change a whole bunch of options in here quickly. So if I want to change all of the contract to intern, then I can just use my Control-H keyboard shortcut and say, look, find all the things that are contract and change them to intern and replace all. And there we are, it's done. Now, if you've got a very long list, that will take time for that processing to complete. So when you are making changes from Access to SharePoint, it does it in what we call rebar mode, row by agonizing row. It doesn't do like a relational database update that updates the complete set quickly. It goes one row at a time, making the modification, whether that be an update or an addition or a deletion. So if it's a long list, don't expect it to be done instantaneously, but at least you can set it running for everything in the list in one quick go, rather than having to page through 100 records at a time, as you might have to do in SharePoint. Okay, so then let's show you something else. I'm going to create a query now. So someone has come to us and they've said, look, this set of data, I want to make sure that everybody who is full-time is marked as having a bonus, and everybody who is not full-time is marked as not having a bonus. So I've created a query. I've just said I want to work with this particular list that we've got attached, and I'm going to say I want to make this an update query. I want to change my bonus field and just make this a little bit bigger because the formula's going to stretch on a little bit. I'm going to put in an immediate if, if, and I'm going to say if the employee type is equal to full time, then bonus should be set to true. My goodness, I can't type today. Otherwise, it should be set to false. So there we are. It hasn't recognized employee type as being a field. So let's just make sure we enclose that in square brackets. There we go. So that hopefully will now work, and I can hit my run button and it will warn me that I've put in 2 square brackets around employee type. Let's try that again. Okay, so now it will warn me that the change I'm about to make we can't undo. So if you're used to working in Access with access tables rather than with linked tables, then you may be used to being able to say, oh no, I'm gonna undo that. So when it completes the update, it would say, I'm going to update 4 records or however many it is. Do you want to proceed, yes or no? But when we're working with a linked table back to SharePoint, then we've got to say up front, yeah, whatever you're about to do, I'm happy with, and I accept that I can't reverse it. So we'll say yes, and we're going to get the hourglass for a second, and in this case it could have actually reversed it, but whatever. Yep, I want to update those records. One record it couldn't update. Why was that? Because I've got the record locked at the moment, so that's fine. So I've let it update the records that I can update. So it thought I was in the middle of editing this, so I'd probably better just close that. And let's try running the query again. Hopefully the query will complete this time. Okay, so no errors that time. So it was just that one of the records was locked previously. It thought I was working on it. So like I say, we've just done that with a tiny set of records, only 4, but it could be 40 or 400 or 4,000 or 40,000. Okay, it will take time if it's a big set, but you're not doing it manually. Yeah, you're writing a little rule that says, okay, if the employee type is full-time, then set the bonus to true, and you're just setting that off running, and you can carry on doing other things. Another little note about big lists is you can see on here down the bottom we've got a little notification that we are online with SharePoint. There's a really neat feature built into the integration between Access and SharePoint, which is that Access will actually cache the data from SharePoint. So if you've got 10,000 rows in your list, then Access will make a copy of those 10,000 rows locally. So if you're doing any searches, any queries, to select data, they're blindingly fast. They're really good because all of the data has been cached, has been replicated down in Access. You can modify how that behavior works. If you go into File and Options under Current Database, down near the bottom of the list, you've got a thing here that talks about what caching mechanism should you use. Do you want to clear the cache on close? So if you say clear cache on close, it does what it says. You close it, all the cache data is discarded, and then when you open access again and you go into one of these really big lists for the first time, you're going to have to wait a minute while all that data gets cached again. But if you don't tick the clear cache on close box, then the cache data is still in there. So when you open access again and you go into that table, you're going to see all the results very, very quickly. Okay, so access will do some checking with SharePoint to say, well, has anything changed since the last time I cached this information? And if it hasn't, then you're going to be into your data straight away. And even if it has, then it can do some clever things in the background to just refresh those records which it knows have been updated since the last time the cache was populated. So let's go back into the, I'll tell you what, let's go into documents for a second. So just to prove that we can use a document library just as easily as we can a list. So I haven't filled in a title for all of my documents here, so I can very quickly just fill these in. Or if I'm quite lazy, I could create another query again that just says, okay, if title is blank, then set it to whatever the file name is. So let's just do that one more time in case you're new to that sort of thing. So let me just come out of the documents table while I do some querying. So I'll create a new query. I want my query based on the documents table. Okay, let's just pop a few of these in here. So here I can say, tell me everywhere where title is currently null. So that's just a select query, that's null. And I can say, okay, now I want to make this an update query, and where the title is null, then just update it to documents.name and run that. And we should find that we've updated 2 rows, and when we go back into this documents table, okay, those 2 rows are updated. Now obviously we're using this with a tiny amount of data here. That's interesting. It's put in not just the name but also the link as well, but you could tweak that. So the important thing is that it's not just a few records. If it's just a few records, then you would do it manually. But if you've got thousands of records, then being able to go in and run these queries really does save an awful lot of time. And you can do appends. You might have a load of data in Excel that you want to append in, and you can do deletes. You might say, okay, I want to delete everything which is over 2 years old, or by whatever criteria you want to work. And so it's very, very quick for doing that. Finally then, let's show you how easy it is to create a form based on these lists. So I'm just going to go into my create. I'm going to just use a form wizard. So I had gallery update demo selected. It's going to ask me, okay, what are the fields that you want to use? So that will be fine. So all of these other fields are things that SharePoint has in the background, and when you connect via access, then all these fields become visible, but we're not interested in doing anything with those. So yeah, that's the data I want, and fine, I'll have this in a column-based layout, and we'll just hit finish on there, accepting the defaults. Obviously there were ways that we could tweak and we could design things if we had wanted to. And here we go. So now we've got a nice form, and I can go and pretty that up and make it look nicer later. Equally, you might want to create a report based on these. So let's do that very quickly. So again, I can select the list that I want to use as my source, or I could base my report on a query. So I could have a query which brings in things from several lists if there's some common factor that I can link the lists by. So we'll go into the report wizard, And again, let's just have those same fields that we were interested in. Maybe what we want to do is, no, we won't add any grouping because we haven't got enough data, but we'll make it ascending by the title. And yeah, we'll accept the defaults again. We'll make it a tabular portrait. And we'll go straight into the preview of the report. And we'll see there we are, straight away we've got a report there which doesn't look bad at all, and it's of course very quick in Access to make modifications to those sort of things. So we can go into the layout view, which is kind of a live dynamic view, and say, well, okay, we don't need quite that much space for the title, and that means that we could move the ID across this way a little bit. Oops. Come on, let me pick it up. There we are. And so we could move these across a little bit. Okay, so you get the idea. It's all very easy, very simple drag and drop stuff, and we can get reports based on our lists or our document libraries as well. Okay, so I think that's all we need to say for the moment. If you are working with SharePoint lists and they're long lists and you want an easier way of working with them, then just link them to Access. It's easy. I've seen people asking questions about, oh, how can we connect to this as a web service so that we can do bulk updates, or, you know, can we write a PowerShell script that will run, you know, in SharePoint to make these changes? You don't need to do any of that. Just link it to Access. It's dead easy. Very simple. Okay, so I hope that has been useful. Hope that gives you some ideas. You know, hope that saves you a little bit of time manually messing around with stuff in SharePoint. As ever, if you like this, drop me a comment. If you don't like this, drop me a comment and tell me why. I really appreciate the comments. It gives me an idea whether you know, these videos are finding an audience that finds them useful. So thanks again, have a great day, and good luck with working with SharePoint and Access.